Hey everyone, just jamming out to some Avril Lavigne right now. Her first album, Let Go, masterpiece and universally beloved. You know what isn't universally beloved though, and is instead actually super controversial? Super Mario Sunshine. Yeah, so this is the entry in the 3D Mario series that's probably the most complicated to talk about. Me? Well, I am a boy and this is a 3D Mario game. Can I make it any more obvious? I fall in the camp of loving Super Mario Sunshine. But that hasn't stopped me from recognizing where it falters and sometimes even straight up misses. Today, I want to go through this game and talk about what makes it so special and unique within the 3D Mario series, but also what holds it back from being the best it could possibly be. Let's flash back to 2002. In February, the New England Patriots won their first Super Bowl title by defeating the St. Louis Rams. In July, when I was a baby staring at the mobile on the ceiling above my crib, Nintendo released Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube. And, most importantly, in June of 2002, Avril Lavigne released her debut album, Let Go, to critical acclaim. In fact, today's the album's 21st birthday. That's right, it can now legally drink. Well, actually it's been able to legally drink in Canada for a few years, but you get my point. The album is flat out incredible. It features 13 absolute bangers, and Avril... Wait, sorry. Wrong video. Today, I'm talking about Super Mario Sunshine. I can talk about Avril Lavigne tomorrow and every day after that for the rest of time. Super Mario Sunshine had the impossible task of following up Super Mario 64, one of the greatest games of all time, and a game that defined an entire generation of gaming and set the standard for 3D platformers to come. For a sequel, Nintendo had to design a game that not only built on the mechanics and gameplay featured in 64, but built off its legacy as well. And they had to create something that could stand on its own. Originally, Nintendo planned to release this sequel in the same console generation, like how they released Majora's Mask for the console after the immense success of Ocarina of Time. They were developing Super Mario 64 2, as well as Majora's Mask for the N64 DD, which was an add-on for the original N64. However, due to the 64 DD's low sales, Nintendo changed the development for Majora's Mask to be just for the N64 and scrapped Super Mario 64 2 altogether, paving the way for the development of Super Mario Sunshine. Eventually, nearly 6 years after Super Mario 64, Nintendo finally released Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube. Sunshine is a controversial game within the Mario franchise, and it is certainly the most divisive amongst the 3D titles. Some fans complained about how the game's levels were less varied than those of its predecessor. Some got frustrated with its difficulty spikes. Some struggled with its camera. I mean, I didn't because it was so incredibly superior to 64's horrendous thing it calls a camera. And some felt FLUDD, the game's new central mechanic, was nothing more than a lame gimmick. Despite these criticisms, Super Mario Sunshine would go on to receive critical acclaim, sell the third most copies of any GameCube title, and be enjoyed by millions of people all over the world. With all that said, let's dive into the weird and wacky world of Super Mario Sunshine. Right away, we can see that Super Mario Sunshine is anything but ordinary. This game actually has a unique story. We open with Mario, Princess Peach, a few Toads, and Toadsworth flying to the tropical paradise of Isle Delfino for a nice little vacation. As they approach their destination, an informal video about Isle Delfino begins to play, and oh my god, this game has voice acting.
Welcome to the sun-drenched tropical paradise of Isle Delfino. We're so pleased to welcome you to our beautiful home.
Yeah, so voice acting. This is the only Mario game that's ever really had it, at least to this extent. And considering Nintendo has never done it before in a Mario game, and the fact that they've never really done it after, you might be thinking, surely, this must be horrendous, right? Well, I mean, yeah. But also no. But also yeah. I'll be honest, I love the voice acting. Does that make it good? Hell no. Many may feel that it is an unwanted inclusion, but I appreciate it being here. It's weird, it's wacky, and it helps to make this game stand out amongst the 3D Mario series. If you out there love the voice acting in Super Mario Sunshine, I don't know who you are, but I'm with you. Although I should note that after playing NBA 2K15 when I was younger and experiencing the atrocious, and boy oh boy, do I mean atrocious, voice acting that game has. My bar for what makes voice acting in a video game good has been lowered to about 200 million feet below. I mean, good God, 2K, is more than just one take too much to ask?
Who have thought
About what?
that a young buck like you could actually do the right thing and avoid getting his sorry
I had a
butt kicked
teammate
out the
hold me
game?
back. He told me to chill.
Sounds like a wise fella to win in this league. You need all hands on deck. Good call. Check it.
The ref should have checked his cell. He was trash all night.
Only thing we can control there is ourselves. Forget the ref, the fan, even the opponent. Handle your business, and the rest will take care of itself. All right?
I guess so.
You're welcome. Wish you never experienced that? Well, welcome to my world. The plot and the voice acting in Super Mario Sunshine are two of the things that really make it stand out amongst really all Mario games, to be honest. In the informational video that plays before arriving at Isle Delfino, Peach notices a shadowy figure lurking in the background that looks an awful lot like Mario. She tries to point it out to Mario and Toadsworth, but yeah, they're gone. Upon crash landing on the Delfino airstrip, we are met with the ground covered in some sort of weird, mysterious goop. Mario has to grab the flood pack, more on this talking water jetpack later, clean up the goop, and defeat a piranha plant to save the day and collect a shine sprite. And that's a wrap on Super Mario Sunshine, is what I would have said if the game ended here. Alright, so Mario saved the day, right? Surely the inhabitants of Isle Delfino are going to welcome him in with open arms, right? Not quite. Upon collecting the shine, two Pianta police officers come and arrest Mario. Remember that Shadow Mario running around causing havoc from earlier? Well, apparently everyone has mistaken the real Mario for him, and so here we are. Mario getting arrested on charges of covering the entire island in goop. His punishment? Clean the entire island. Okay, so let's unpack this undeniably complex setup to the story. Does it make sense? Not in the slightest. Is Isle Delfino's justice system fair? Well, considering Mario doesn't seem to have a lawyer and Peach's objection to the charges against him is quickly overruled? That's a big fat no. But is it different than the typical and quite frankly overused Bowser has kidnapped Princess Peach again? You bet. One thing is clear, this is not your grandparents' Super Mario story. No, Nintendo went full Scorsese on us here. Plus, it's seemingly pretty easy to mistake regular old Mario for Shadow Mario, right? I mean, it's not like the first thing you do as Mario after the sentencing is chase down Shadow Mario in Delfino Plaza in broad daylight for everyone to see. Oh wait, that's exactly what happens. Okay, so the story isn't the most cohesive or logical. But again, I'm not going to complain when Nintendo went out of its way to be at least a little original in the plot. Plus, absolutely none of this is really all too central to the player's journey through the game, so I'm just going to let things be. After saving Princess Peach from the clutches of Shadow Mario escapes and opens a portal to the first level of the game by painting a large M on the side of a statue. And off we go. Before going any further, I think it's important we discuss FLUDD, which stands for the Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dowsing Device, and it is this game's central mechanic. It's a water-based tool that allows Mario to shoot water for various purposes like defeating enemies or clearing goop, hover above the ground, rocket himself to great heights, or run super duper fast. All of these actions being dependent on which nozzle you use. The device depends on water, so if you ever run out, simply find a body of water to fill it back up. FLUDD has 4 nozzles. The squirt nozzle, which is the default nozzle and allows Mario to spray water in front of him. The hover nozzle is also available from the start of the game and is the main secondary nozzle. The turbo and rocket nozzles are unlocked later in the game once you've acquired enough shine sprites. The hover nozzle can be substituted out for the rocket or turbo nozzles once they've been unlocked. And you're able to freely switch between which secondary nozzle you have equipped, pretty much at will. As I see it, there are 2 main complaints regarding FLUDD. The first is that it's nothing more than a gimmick. And honestly, if that's the way you feel, you're probably not wrong. FLUDD appears in Super Mario Sunshine and only Super Mario Sunshine. While it's central to the gameplay, you're often told when you have to use it. Save for the hover nozzle, you really don't get many opportunities to experiment with the different nozzles and how they can change your approach to certain missions. I mean, the rocket and turbo nozzles are largely situational. I feel like they're mostly used for accessing levels in the hub world and are rarely required or even compelling to use within any of the missions. In fact, in beating the game, I never once used the turbo nozzle except when I tested it in Delfino Plaza immediately after unlocking it. That's why whenever you hear me talk about it, it's going to be the exact same clip of me testing out the turbo nozzle in Delfino Plaza and nothing more. Furthermore, you only have access to 2 nozzles at any given time, the spray nozzle and one of the other 3. The hover nozzle, being the most versatile throughout the game, is the one I always want to have equipped, and so I never really feel the desire to substitute it out. I will say that I know the developers originally planned for there to be more than just the 4 nozzles included in the final game. In fact, I think half a dozen were left on the cutting room floor. I personally would have welcomed more nozzles with open arms, quite frankly, than just the 4 we got. I think it would have made Flood's inclusion seem even more necessary. As it stands, I can understand why people are underwhelmed with it. The second main complaint regarding Flood is that it makes the game easier due to it being able to trivialize what may otherwise be difficult missions. I think this is mostly in reference to the hover nozzle, which I personally consider to be Flood's main nozzle. Let me explain. In their simplest form, Mario games are about platforming prowess. If there was anything that was missing from Mario's moveset in 64, it was some sort of mid-air correction move. With the hover nozzle, we finally have that. I can't begin to tell you how many times the hover nozzle saved me from falling off a tall platform and having to restart a challenge. The one thing I think is unfortunate, however, is how the hover nozzle essentially replaces Mario's long jump from his moveset in 64, which was one of his most iconic and useful moves from that game. While I don't think the long jump needed to be removed in Sunshine, I can understand the developer's logic. Plus, a long jump plus hover nozzle move feels like it would just be way too overpowered. But it's still pretty disappointing. Here's the thing though. As much fun as I find utilizing Flood to be, and as much as I think the hover nozzle in particular fits in with Mario's core moveset, I do agree that it makes platforming much, much easier. Hell, the developers must have agreed with this sentiment considering the secret stages scattered throughout the game. I think one of Sunshine's greatest triumphs is its sense of immersion. It sets out to make the player feel like they are truly on a tropical vacation gone wrong. You visit a lot of large, open, tropical areas. The hub world of Delfino Plaza fits its cohesive theme. The music is wildly fitting. Heck, after beating the game, Mario gets a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of sunglasses. Yet, whenever you have to enter these secret stages, you can feel the game losing its grip on its sense of immersion. These stages are scattered throughout the game's main levels, as well as Delfino Plaza. When you enter one, your Flood pack is taken away from you, and you must complete a difficult platforming challenge without it. For the most part, these levels are the main source of difficulty throughout the game. For the most part. On their own, I think these levels are fine. They feature pretty solid platforming and are of a good and fair difficulty. Mostly. But I can't emphasize enough how immersion breaking they are. You will be exploring a huge open area, enter a cave, and all of a sudden you're transported to some weird alternate pocket dimension that plays completely differently from the rest of the game. Okay, but what makes this game so immersive? Well, it has to be its cohesive theme of the tropical vacation gone wrong and how Isle Delfino was crafted to maintain this theme. I mean, who hasn't had that experience of a vacation not going as well as we would have liked? It's just like Avril Lavigne says in the final song, called Naked, on her debut album. Life is like a game sometimes. To me, the overall vibes of 64 and Sunshine couldn't be more different. 64 is largely a solo experience. You roam around a hollow castle, and the only other characters in the entire place are the occasional toad. In the levels, there are very few NPCs to interact with. Most of the characters you encounter are enemies. In Sunshine, however, the world is much more alive. Around every corner you'll find Piantas or Nokis, some friendly, others not so much. Delfino Plaza and its various levels fit this theme. The environments are colorful and vibrant, the music is upbeat and lively, everything just screams tropical paradise. With this in mind, let's talk about Sunshine's hub world, Delfino Plaza. Princess Peach's castle from Super Mario 64 might be more iconic, but Delfino Plaza is, in my opinion, just as strong, if not stronger. Considering 64's levels are all disconnected from one another, the idea of jumping into paintings to access each of them is not only fun, but makes sense honestly. But for Sunshine, each level takes place on Isle Delfino, In fact, the game is always reminding you of this since you can always see other levels in the distance from almost any location in the game. As such, having the hub world be a location on Isle Delfino that's just as colorful and vibrant as the rest of the game is flat out brilliant. The plaza is this big open area with a ton of cool secrets. I find it incredibly fun just to roam around in it and explore. There are piantas all over the place to interact with. There are also these cool underground tunnels that allow you to traverse the plaza, and I love how they play a remix of the underground theme from the 2D games. It's a really nice touch. One of my favorite secrets has to be this little island you could swim to off the beach. The pianta you talk to says he's been stranded there for 3 years and hasn't been able to get back to the mainland because he doesn't know how to swim. I mean, it isn't that far, my guy. You could just yell over or jump around and make noise. I've been here for 3 minutes and saw you almost immediately. You're telling me nobody over there has seen you in 3 whole years? Anyways, later in the game, the town gets flooded and the pianta finds himself back in Delfino Plaza. But it turns out he now misses the island he spent those 3 years on. So much for his happy ending. Wait, wrong album. Okay, so the hub world is fantastic, but it doesn't mean anything if the game's levels aren't of at least a similar quality. Luckily, level design is one of Sunshine's greatest strengths. Whereas 64 has 15 levels, Sunshine only has 7. However, what Sunshine loses in having a smaller collection of levels, it gains in the depth and cohesiveness of those levels. The first level of the game is Bianco Hills, a quaint, picturesque area located in the center of Isle Delfino. It's a lush community of villas located at the foot of Corona Mountain, and its famous windmills. Windmills? Are you kidding me? Windmills spin peacefully in the gentle sea breezes. The second level is Rico Harbor, Isle Delfino's port city. It is home to boats of all sizes and a thriving tourist trade. Its fish market has the freshest seafood for miles around. Next up, we have Gelato Beach, which is the island's largest beach. Here's the scoop. It's a really nice and peaceful spot, but there's more gelato in my freezer than there is here. Not a lick of this sweet treat anywhere. Pina Park is an amusement park located just off the coast of Isle Delfino's mainland. It features a roller coaster, Ferris wheel, and danger. Noki Bay is the home of the Nokis. It focuses on vertical level design featuring steep cliffs and seabeds, a huge waterfall, and soaring towers. Sierra Beach might just be my favorite level in the entire game. It's always sunset at this seaside resort. It has 3 main areas: outside the resort, inside the resort, and the casino. Although despite the serene atmosphere, I can't help but feel like I'm in a White Lotus episode while I'm visiting this location. Especially when the hotel manager says things like this: "Hey Armand, I'm doing this because I need a shine and not because your lame attempt to trick me worked, okay? I'm not nobody's fool." I am nobody's fool? I mean, Avril says I'm not nobody's fool. But does that actually make sense? Like, if I'm nobody's fool, that means I'm not a fool. But if I'm not nobody's fool, that means I am? I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this. Double negatives don't make any sense. Help me out in the comments if you'd be so kind. Also, if you're at this point in the video, first of all, a sincere thank you, and I hope you're enjoying. And leave a comment down below with a thought about Super Mario Sunshine and a favorite Avril Lavigne song if you have one. I'd love to hear from you. Finally, we have Pianta Village, another strong contender for best level in the game. This ancestral home of the Piantas was built against a giant tree as protection against wild beasts. Giant mushrooms thrive beneath the village as well. Overall, I love the levels in Super Mario Sunshine. They all fit the theme of a tropical vacation and aesthetically fit Isle Delfino, but they all have unique identities of their own. They all just feel so well developed. It feels like I'm actually visiting real places within the Mario universe instead of just a bunch of random assorted Mario levels. Now, some may say that the levels blend together because their aesthetics aren't as varied as the levels in 64. Others may say they're not as explorable. But these are things I'll never say. That sound right there means I've successfully referenced each and every one of the 13 songs on Avril Lavigne's debut album. It was certainly a challenge, but I'm really glad I let myself make the references in any order as opposed to just sticking to the order of the songs on the album. I think it was a lot more fun that way. Speaking of structure, let's talk about Super Mario Sunshines. One of my favorite things about Super Mario 64 is the freedom in its structure. The game has 120 power stars, but only 70 are required to beat the game. As such, the player can jump around levels to collect those power stars as they see fit. The only restrictions are the number of power stars required to unlock certain levels, and in very few cases, a power-up the player needs to unlock in order to complete a mission. As much as I love Sunshine, I have to admit that I really do not care for its structure. Like 64, there are more shines than are required to beat the game. However, there is one ginormous difference. Each of the game's 7 main levels contain 10 episodes, with each episode containing 1 shine. You must play these episodes in order and complete the 7th one of each to unlock the final boss fight. To me, this structure actively fights against what this game wants to be, or at least what I think it wants to be, a game where you explore these huge open areas and do some platforming along the way. Whereas 64's levels were giant sandboxes, the episode structure of Sunshine actively boxes you into the levels. Now, to be clear, changing up the structure from 64 is not a good or bad thing in and of itself, and this new structure isn't inherently good or bad. In my opinion, it comes down to how the developers design the game around this structure that determines its effectiveness or lack thereof. But again, it just doesn't seem to fit thematically. Also, within this structure, there are only 50 shines you need to acquire to unlock the final level and beat the game. That means that if that's the only thing you're striving for, you have no reason to play any episodes beyond the episode 7s, you have no reason to hunt for blue coins, and there's not even any reason to explore Delfino Plaza. This is all really disappointing. Also, there's nothing in the game that tells you exactly what you need to do in order to beat the game, unlike 64 when it told you when you reached a certain number of power stars that you just unlocked a Bowser level. You could theoretically collect just 50 shines to beat the game, yeah, but you could just as easily find yourself with something like 90 simply because you didn't know what the requirements of the game were. Furthermore, given that players are required to complete episodes in a specific order, I was expecting there would be at least a pretty clear progression through each level where the missions get harder, more complex, or the environment would change pretty drastically based on what you did in previous episodes. Unfortunately, I didn't find this to be the case in most situations. In just about every level, I found the order of the episodes to be rather arbitrary. In terms of difficulty, it wasn't like later episodes were necessarily harder than earlier ones. Difficulty can be pretty all over the place here, so the game features some random difficulty spikes at points. There was nothing mechanically or story-wise that would happen in an earlier episode that would set up a later one, and the environment would sometimes change from episode to episode, but again, those changes just weren't usually too significant. Let's take a look at an example of a level where the episode order feels rather arbitrary. Rico Harbor. In episode 1, you defeat a Gooper Blooper at the port. In episode 2, you use a blooper to surf into a tunnel and then ride a blooper through the obstacle course within a time limit. In episode 3, you have to scale the beams over the water in order to capture a shine located in a cage that can only be entered from above. Episode 4 is a secret course that you can access through Rico Tower. In episode 5, you fight the Gooper Blooper again, this time on a helipad. In episode 6, you surf on a blooper to collect 8 red coins above the water within a time limit. And finally, in episode 7, you chase Shadow Mario. So let's break this down. For starters, you fight the same boss twice in the span of a few episodes. There's no difference in these two fights other than the location they take place in. Additionally, that 7th episode when you chase Shadow Mario is the same episode 7 you do in every single level. It's not particularly challenging, but it is so annoying to do the same thing over and over again when it absolutely did not need to be that way. Now, I will give the developers credit for the blooper racing missions here. You start off with an easier one, and then you have a harder one a few episodes later. In the first episode, you're mostly focusing on speed, and in the second, you're focusing more on the precision of your movement. I'm a big fan of that. However, not every level has bad episode progression. For example, I really liked the progression in Noki Bay. When you enter episode 1, you realize the water is poisonous. The first Noki you talk to tells you he's trying to figure out the cause. In this first episode, you defeat a Monty Mole on the top of the cliff, which uncorks the waterfall. This didn't work, so in episode 2, you fight a Gooper Blooper at the top of the ruins. Yes, I know it's another Gooper Blooper fight, but it makes sense in the context of this level, I feel. Unfortunately, that also didn't work, but in episode 3, the Noki thinks he's figured out what is truly wrong, and that the source is coming from underwater. So he has you test out the underwater flood controls to collect 8 red coins in a bottle. Finally, in episode 4, you travel underwater to clean Eelymouth's teeth. A weird level to be sure, and one that doesn't control all too well. Sorry, that's Taylor Swift. But ultimately a pretty cool and unique episode. However, this is when the progression falls off. In episode 5, you have to beat Il Piantissimo in a race, which is one of the easiest such races in the game. In episode 6, it's a secret stage, and in episode 7, it's yet another Shadow Mario chase. There was so much potential with Noki Bay and how it uses its episode to progress through a story, but it ultimately only lasts 4 episodes and just leaves me wanting more. It's a real shame. As I think you can tell from the overview of just these 2 levels, another one of Sunshine's greatest downfalls is its repeated content. This is a huge criticism of the game. You fight PD Piranha twice. You fight Monty Mole twice. You fight Goober Blooper 3 times. You fight the regular Goop Piranhas a total of 5 times. You race Il Piantissimo 3 times. Each level has at least 1 secret section. And the absolute worst has to be that you chase Shadow Mario 7 times. 8 if you include the first time you chase him around in the opening minutes of the game. Additionally, there are a ton of red coin missions. I think there are 20 in the game. You only have to do 5 during the first 7 episodes of each level. However, if you're going for 100% completion, get ready to collect too many of these things. In fact, in both Bianco Hills and Serena Beach, all 3 of episodes 8 through 10 are red coin missions. Honestly, it's just really disappointing. Okay, I feel like I've been pretty negative about this game for a little bit, despite my claims that I actually love it. Allow me to get back on a more positive note. Yes, the game's structure and repeated content can be frustrating, but I tend to look past that because the levels and missions are so well designed, and because the game's controls are just so fluid. It's honestly so fun to just run and jump around with Mario. Flood has a big impact on this, yes, but Mario's core movement has also been tightened up from 64 and is just an absolute blast to mess around with. Also, within its level design, Sunshine often penalizes the player for making mistakes through inconvenience rather than death, which I really appreciate. For example, in that episode 3 of Rico Harbor I alluded to earlier, if you fall off a high platform, you're probably going to fall back into the water. Instead of being booted out of the level entirely, you just have to find your way back up. In this process, you may find new ways, perhaps even more efficient ways, to scale the vertical level design. Similar inconveniences are found in Noki Bay and Pina Park. There are few exceptions to this rule though. In episode 3 of Pianta Village, titled The Goopy Inferno, we have the player scaling the village underside, which is located above a bottomless pit. Making a mistake here does indeed mean instant death. But to be fair, this is the last level you unlock, and so the higher difficulty is warranted. The secret levels similarly feature instant death as a punishment for failure, but you do at least get spawned back at the beginning of the secret area rather than being booted out to the main level or Delfino Plaza. Additionally, these stages tend to have a few 1-ups scattered around that are obtainable upon the start of every attempt, so you can usually complete this while avoiding a game over. In fact, the second secret stage of Bianco Hills, which was one I had a lot of difficulty beating for whatever reason, I consistently found myself getting 2 1-ups on each run, so I was actually gaining lives as I suffered death after death after death. There are some examples though where failure will take a life and boot you out of the entire level. Blooper surfing for red coins stands out as being amongst the most frustrating. If you run into anything, and I mean anything, you die. The first time I successfully collected all 8 red coins, I actually died because of the camera shifting to the appearance of the shine on the dock, and then switching back to Mario without giving me enough time to adjust my course, and so I went straight into a red beam. Pain. But again, for the most part, this wasn't super prevalent throughout the game. Before moving on, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Super Mario Sunshine has a few of the most infuriating and unfair levels to ever grace a Mario game. Here are a few. The first I'll mention is the Watermelon Festival, which takes place in episode 8 of Gelato Beach. You have to find the largest watermelon on the beach and push it to the surf cabana. Seems simple enough, right? Wrong. Oh, so very wrong. If the watermelon touches anything, and I mean anything, it will pop and respawn back at the top of the hill. So as you're pushing it, you need to make sure to defeat all of the cataquacks so that they don't pop the watermelon. The only saving grace of this level is that I love watermelon, and it's my favorite fruit. So points for that. Another infamous level is the Pachinko Machine, which is a secret level you can find in Delfino Plaza. You launch Mario from the bottom left corner of the board, and you try to land in specific locations to nab 8 red coins. The catch? Failure to land in any safe zone results in instant death as you fall through a large opening in the bottom of the board. But not only is death always right around the corner, this level features unique physics. Whoop-de-doo! The launcher will push Mario right, making it really hard to get to the holes on the left side of the board. What were they thinking with this one? Perhaps the most infamous mission in the entire game is the lily pad stage. Not only is it ridiculously difficult, it requires an even more ridiculous method to just access it. You're not seeing gameplay footage of it here, and you want to know why? Because I, out of principle, have refused to play it. As far as I'm concerned, Super Mario Sunshine has 119 shines, and you cannot convince me otherwise. But here's the thing about all these levels. They aren't required to beat the game, so you never have to interact with any of them. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you straight up missed the Pachinko Machine and Lily Pad levels altogether during your playthrough. Here's one more mission that lives in infamy. The Sandbird level. This is episode 4 of Gelato Beach, meaning you have to complete it to beat the game. You enter this egg, and all of a sudden, you find yourself on the back of the Sandbird. Your goal is to collect 8 red coins. 7 of them are on the Sandbird's back, and 1 is on a tower you will have to jump to at the peak of the bird's flight. However, the movement pattern of the Sandbird is pretty awkward. It's really easy to fall off, and at one point it even rotates a full 90 degrees. It's pretty majestic, I'll admit, but it's also difficult to work around. I actually didn't find the level to be terrible, but this is a pretty wild difficulty spike in the middle of the 3rd unlocked level in the game. And if you want to try and nab the blue coins here, I would say there's a really good chance that that story is going to end with you taking a baseball bat to your GameCube. I personally never attempted to grab a single one of them. Perhaps the most infamous required level is the one I've saved for last, Corona Mountain. It's the final level of the game, which you unlock after beating the 7th episode of all 7 main levels. As a final level, it's actually pretty short and overall not too difficult, with the exception of this boat section here. You have to spray water in order to move the boat in your desired direction, but it's incredibly sensitive and bumping into anything results in instant death. Like the Sandbird level, if you're going for the blue coins here, that's where the real challenge is. Again, I didn't even make an attempt. So Corona Mountain leads to the final boss fight against Bowser, which unfortunately, as a final boss fight, is incredibly underwhelming. All you have to do is use the rocket nozzle, time some ground pounds, and you've beaten Super Mario Sunshine. Honestly, an earlier fight against a Mecha Bowser, much earlier in the game, is so much more epic and fun. By the way, I should mention that Shadow Mario is actually Bowser Jr., who made his debut in this game. And he is convinced for most of the story that Princess Peach is his mother. Once again, it's better than a simple kidnapping story. Okay, I'm about to say something really weird for me, so strap in. When I really enjoy a game, I don't want to stop playing it. I want to experience every last little thing it has to offer. I may not ever reach 100% completion, but I do often strive for it. And I do truly love Super Mario Sunshine. However, after beating the game, I didn't feel too compelled to take on the post-game episodes, collect all the blue coins, or discover all the hidden secrets in Delfino Plaza. Again, this is incredibly weird for me. I think my feelings here boil down to 2 main things. One is the game's structure. Not to harp on this again, but in 64, each power star held the same value. Each counted as 1 out of 70 power stars required to unlock the final Bowser fight, and 1 out of 120 in a quest towards 100% completion. In Sunshine, however, there are 50 shines that inherently hold more value than the rest, those being the airstrip shine and the shines earned in the first 7 episodes of each level. Spending significant time searching for secret shines and blue coins, or even taking on episodes beyond the 7th ones, can start to feel a little worthless. Don't get me wrong, it can still be fun, but there are some levels in the game that are quite frankly too frustrating and or too annoying and or too repetitive for me to want to try. I have no intention of trying the lily pad stage. I don't really want to try the pachinko machine or watermelon festival missions again. I don't have a desire to return to the secret levels to collect red coins, even if I get to use Flood in them now. And there are just too many blue coins. Ah yes, the dreaded blue coins. I think this is the second main reason I feel the way I do. I actually love the inclusion of the blue coins, but I have mixed feelings on their prominence. On the one hand, I think it's really cool to have so many extra opportunities for exploration, especially given the game's structure. With each episode only containing one shine sprite, it can often feel like there's really no point to exploring the level as a whole and you should just instead focus on the task at hand. However, the blue coins are your reward for scouring every corner of a level. The game features 240 of these bad boys, 30 in each level, 19 in Delfino Plaza, 1 in the airstrip, and 10 in Corona Mountain. You're bound to run into at least one blue coin if you look hard enough. On the other hand, some are ridiculously hard to find, and even worse, some are only available in specific episodes within a level. This is probably the worst aspect of the blue coins. If I'm playing the game without any help from the internet, how in the world am I supposed to know that? And these things account for 24 of the shines in the game, a fifth of the game's total shine count. If I miss a single blue coin in the one episode it's included in, and I'm sitting there at the end of the game with 239 blue coins, I don't just have to scour every level, I will have to scour each and every episode. Honestly, that's bogus. I kinda wish rather than being tied to shines, the blue coins were tied to a cool shop where you could buy clothes for Mario or some sort of other aesthetic change. I think it would make the blue coins feel a lot more rewarding to collect. But back to the question of why I don't feel too compelled to keep playing for a significant amount of time after defeating Bowser. The idea of going through each episode again to hunt for blue coins and attempting a handful of just flat out unfair and frustrating levels just doesn't sound fun to me. At least not more fun than moving on to a different 3D Mario game. And knowing that I will likely never make a true attempt for 100% completion makes me feel even less like trying to nab one of those other post-game shines. All of this is to say that Super Mario Sunshine is a bit rough around the edges. I love the sense of immersion it provides. Mario controls so incredibly well, I think the level design is stellar, and it's just so fun to run around and explore the world of Isle Delfino. Yet, its structure holds it back. It has some missions that are wildly difficult compared to the rest of the game. It repeats a lot of content. There are so many blue coins. And perhaps most importantly, a lot of these features are all in conflict with the large open tropical paradise of Isle Delfino. However, there is a potential explanation to all of this. I mentioned at the beginning of the video how the sequel for Super Mario 64 was delayed and delayed and delayed until eventually Super Mario Sunshine began being developed. Well, here's the thing. Because of those delays and the clamoring for a new 3D Mario game, Sunshine had a development period that lasted just 18 months, which is significantly less than that of any other 3D Mario title. There were so many ideas left on the cutting room floor. More levels, more nozzles for Flood, a train system within Delfino Plaza to travel to each of the game's levels, and a scrapped mission structure just to name a few. In fact, Peanut Park was originally supposed to be another hub world, but once the number of levels was reduced, the developers likely felt there was no need for that anymore. And I wholeheartedly agree. Yoshi was also planned to have a much bigger role in the game. Oh, have I not mentioned Yoshi yet? Well, that's because if you blink, you're gonna miss him. Honestly, knowing a bigger role was planned makes so much more sense. The game's whole structure changed as it got closer and closer to release, and with the smaller collection of levels, they likely had to add episodes to the levels they did include, as well as beef up the number of blue coins. In those added levels, it would make sense that they would repeat content, add in secret stages, and even have you enter those stages multiple times. Ultimately, it speaks to the immense talent of the Nintendo developers that this game turned out as polished as it did. It's a bit rougher around the edges than most Nintendo games and has controversial aspects, but it is a good game, and it is one that I love and will continue to cherish. With that said, part of me will always wonder what this game could have been with a bit more development time. It's clear the developers had a wealth of ideas and huge aspirations for this game. They didn't want to rest on their laurels after Super Mario 64 and make the same game again. Instead, they set out to create a unique experience that pushed 3D platformers forward. They set out to design a game whose legacy could be as significant as that of Super Mario 64. Many will argue that Super Mario 64 is the most influential, or at least one of the most influential, video games of all time. I 1,000,000% agree. But I think people tend to downplay the legacy of Sunshine. So many of the ideas introduced in Sunshine, ideas that separated it from its predecessor, are ideas that were further developed in future 3D platformers, especially those within the Mario series. I think a lot of the DNA of Sunshine is baked into Super Mario Odyssey in particular, but I'll save that discussion for a future video. So, what is the legacy of Super Mario Sunshine? To me, it's a game that was ahead of its time. I mean this in two ways. One, in that it has elements that have been further fleshed out by more modern 3D platformers in a way that's been really effective, but also in that it was released too early for its own good. I still love Super Mario Sunshine. Its immersion, its controls, its level design are undoubtedly among some of the best in any video game I've ever played. But it just has so much missed potential, and I think that's a huge reason why I always feel so conflicted whenever playing it. It's just like the great Avril Lavigne said all the way back in 2002. It's complicated. I gotcha. There's an Avril Lavigne video the whole time. You better go listen to that album now.